Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and I'm going to do my best not to burst out laughing because I've been having such a good time with our guest today, Brian Lucey. He's just a great guy, brilliant mastering human being. He owns Magic Garden Mastering, and his deal is he wants to make the world a more musical place, and he's got an incredible track record of doing so through mastering. He's got a great sense of humor, bright dude, and I admire his haircut. In fact, I resemble his haircut, so it's not often that I get to have a guest like that. Brian, and actually one of the things that makes him such a great mastering human being, what do they call that? Mastering? A masterer? What did
let's go with mastering engineer.
A mastering engineer, yeah. I feel weird saying you're a masterer. Anyway, one of the things that makes Brian such a good mastering engineer is because he is a guitar player originally and a really good musician. He became successful internationally as a mastering engineer from that. To date, he's mastered 7 Grammy-winning albums or singles, 1 Australian ARIA Award, and he's got 4 Billboard #1 hits with Liam Gallagher, Shania Twain, Royal Blood, and the Greatest Showman Soundtrack, which spent over 10 weeks at #1 in the UK, which is the most weeks at #1 since the Beatles. No, since Adele in 2011. And it was iTunes #1 in 77 countries, which is pretty darn cool. He works on projects by major artists like Depeche Mode, the Black Keys. In fact, he worked on their biggest album, which is Brothers. That's the black album with the typeset on the front. He's worked on records with Marilyn Manson, Lucinda Williams, David Lynch and Ringo Starr, DiFranco, Doyle Bramhall II, both his last album and his new one coming out. And his last album was absolutely phenomenal. Cage the Elephant, Dr. John, Arctic Monkeys, Spanish Gold, and The Kills, and like literally dozens of other well-known artists. You can check out his website at magicgardenmastering.com. He also supports artists just starting out, working on a sliding scale with discounted pricing for the non-major artists. So one of the cool things he does is he will work with you based on where you're at in your career with the goal of, ratcheting that up for both of you basically so that you get better sound, you get better music, more people vibe on what you're doing, and the list goes on and on. He's a self-taught guitarist, played professionally in the city in the late 80s in the East Village. And this is cool too. He also studied with Robert Fripp and Guitarcraft from 1989 to 2006. We'll talk a little bit about that because that's really interesting. He was in a creative rock band from 94 to 2008. And he started mastering in 99 at the end of putting together a 2-inch 16-track analog home studio. And today he's considered one of the top mastering engineers in the world. Man, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I appreciate your humor. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate that we get along that way. It's not everybody thinks I'm funny.
I literally can't look at you because I'm going to start laughing. I am really sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to run a professional show here. You're originally from Columbus, man, but at some point you moved to the city. I was curious what you were doing in Columbus at that time musically and what prompted you to move to New York.
Yeah, so I just came to New York with friends. I went to Kenyon College for a couple years. I was blessed to be given a scholarship, even though I never really worked too hard in school, and I'm not really a school guy, that's for sure. But I was at Kenyon, and there were a lot of East Coast kids there. They would pay full ticket, and us Ohio folks would get a bit of a bump on the, or a bit of a discount, I guess you'd say. So anyway, my friend Conrad wanted to take me to the Village, wanted to take me to the city. We rode out on his Suzuki 650 together with a couple girlfriends, taking our stuff in their car. And I ended up just bumming around the East Village. And, in that era, it was close enough to the 60s where there was that vibe of like, this is where something happened once upon a time. Dylan did something over there, and Hendrix lit his guitar on fire over there. And, it was close enough to that era. And it was really cool. And I ended up at a open mic situation, met a couple guys from Ireland, and just sort of jamming in the bathroom, and then ran into them a day or two later as I walked down Bleecker Street. They were playing in the Red Lion,
yeah,
which which was a glass fronted place. And they were a cover band, but really the best kind of cover band. You know, Irishmen of that era, I don't know if this is the same today, but they knew American music like encyclopedically. They knew and loved the history of American music like we all wanted to. They knew everything we knew and then some. And so they played this broad range of covers, you know, again, from 89 backwards. So we did classic rock and we did Talking Heads and we did sort of all kinds of things. And they invited me to play and I sat in with them, just sort of like, you know, we're in A minor, take a solo kind of thing. And it turned into 6 nights a week and it ran for months.
Wow.
And it was wonderful. They had all the gigs set up. I didn't have to think at all. I didn't have to do anything. I would just, you know, go to the gig, play all night. Pretty smoky clubs back then. That was a little rough, but you know, I was young.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and it was great. And after a long summer of it, you know, I could have stayed, but I didn't want to play covers for the rest of my life. And I got a lot of compliments. Hey, you sound like this famous guy or that famous guy. And I thought, well, but that's not me. You know, they're not saying you sound like you. And I thought, well, maybe there's a life for me that I have my own identity and I'm not just playing other people's stuff, you know. So I left and came back to Ohio, and after having that experience, really couldn't deal with school anymore.
Yeah, but
music, you do music every day like that, as many of the listeners probably have done. It changes your life. So that was the beginning of really the commitment to living a life in music.
That's the Red Lion, by the way, is still around. It's one of the few places.
Is it there?
Yeah, it's still there on Bleecker Street. Yeah,
like collegey, touristy, you know, a lot of hot girls. You know, it was. I was living it up. You know, I was young and it was really fun. But it was one of those things where you wanted it to last, but you knew it wouldn't. So I had to let it go. You know,
I give you credit for having like the awareness to think of, you know, it's nice to sound like this, but I think I really need to do something authentic. I think that takes a pretty high level of awareness that most 20-year-olds probably do not have.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but that was my thought at the time. You know, I mean, some people in the world think I have a really huge ego. Other people really understand that I come from a place of great humility. And for me, that may sound ironic in this example, but to do something which is authentic to yourself is, to me, actually the more humble path, because it's a harder path.
Much.
You can copy somebody else all day long. You know, you can play Purple Haze really well, but you didn't write it. So that to me was like, it's kind of in line with my musical philosophy, you know, which is authenticity. It wasn't authentic. And that's what I enhance today in mastering jobs. It's the authenticity of the artist. You know, that to me, authenticity is the building block for what makes music connect. And I guess some part of me as a young person was aware of that, and I didn't want to live in the ego of being you know, my ass kissed.
Yeah,
that weren't authentic to me. You know,
I just think that took a big level of awareness, because most people. I can tell you myself for sure, I don't think I would have had that level of awareness at that age for where I was at in my life. So, and it would have been real easy to say, man, I sound like all these people, forgetting about the ego, just to say, hey, so let me keep doing that.
Right.
You know, that would have been.
Yeah. Yeah. It just something about it, you know, didn't resonate as right for me. You know?
Yeah. Well, good for you, man.
Well, thank you. I'm much happier doing this life than what that would have become. So it was the right choice.
Playing 6 nights a week in the Red Lion. Yeah, I would imagine you probably.
Yes. Or any derivative.
Any derivative.
Where that might have gone. Yes.
What, I know the Greatest Showman Soundtrack that did really well that you worked on, that did 10 weeks at #1 in the UK. Hugh Jackman, from what I read, did a lot of that actual singing there, correct?
Yeah, it's a funny story. You know, to be honest, I'm not huge on musicals. My mom took me to musicals growing up. You know, we joke in my family that I'm 1/8 Jewish because my great grandmother was Caroline Rothschild's. So there's kind of like a love-hate thing with the musical, which to me is a very, you know, it's kind of a tribe. It's in the tribe. And we would go to like, she'd take me to like Fiddler on the Roof, and we do all this stuff. And she loves Mandy Patinkin, who I have a hard time, with. So when I got this musical, I'd never done a musical. And this is an interesting story, because in mastering, there's a myth that mastering is sort of stylistically dependent. They say, well, what have you done before? Or, what hip hop have you done? Or what pop have you done? And they say this to young mastering engineers, and I heard it a lot. And this was a case where, I was given a style I'd never done, and obviously you've quoted the success of it, so I must have done something right.
Yeah,
having never done it. So this sort of proves my point that mastering is not style related. So back to the tale. I get this thing. I'm doing this thing. It's a musical. I have a strong ethic about respecting everything I do. I treat every project the same. So, my inner compass musically was like, well, I'm not big on musicals, but my professional compass was, I'm working for Greg Wells, who's a wonderful guy and a great, well-known producer, and first time working for Greg. And here's the job of the day. And, when you sit down to the job of the day, you give it 100% every time. And I don't let my personal bias in there. So I do the thing. I'm like, okay, well, that was kind of interesting. It's done. Moving on. And then the next day or two, he loved it. My first pass doesn't always go over super well. It usually goes over pretty well. That was a case of like, I'm pretty sure it was like, no revisions, we're done. So then I get, what's known as the metadata, which is all the track info, the names, the titles. And I'm putting this in a day or two later. And I go to type it in. I'm like Zach Efron, Zac Efron. I think I've heard him. And then Hugh Jack Man. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So I'm Zendaya. I'm like putting in these names, and and it hits me. This is a star-studded thing, right? So did I ever meet these people? No. It's just the job of the day.
Yeah.
Truth be told. And the job of the day in a style that if I was in my free time, I probably would never listen to. But you do the job of the day with respect, and then good things happen oftentimes. So it was a really interesting project.
But that comment that you made, I hear that a lot for different things. Like, well, what have you done in X category? And I think there are. It's like anything else, we talked about competency of people in various professions. You have people that are competent in that thing, and that's it. But you have people like I write ad copy. I've written ad copy in over 100 different businesses, and once in a blue moon, I'll get someone. Oh, if you worked in this, I'm like, no. Oh, are you qualified to do that? I mean, and I would imagine it's the same response as you. Well, I'm dealing with people. As long as you're putting this in front of people.
Right.
It's not a worry, I haven't sold fruit pies, but I've eaten a couple, and I kind of know what people like in them. And
I've sold fruit and I've sold pies. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fear thing. I understand that.
On their part.
Yeah. Which is fine.
Yeah.
We all live in that sort of balance between being loving and fearful. And as a mastering engineer, it's partly therapeutic. I'm sort of taking people over the threshold between what they thought they made and what the world will judge them forever as having made. So there's an insecurity component with artists of all stripes in my chair every day. So that question is one of the many questions that I get, where people they're struggling. It's an insecure moment. You're exposing your baby to the world, and you thought it was going to be a dog, and it ends up it's an octopus with pink hair, and you're trying to come to terms with that, and you can't control how people judge what you do. So there's a lot of insecurity. So yeah, people say, oh, did you do this or did you do that? I say, well, look, music is ultimately the same. It's the same game. It's vibrations in space. It's time, it's rhythm, and it connects with people, and it uplifts their day. Or it doesn't, Yeah. It's all the same gig. So, there's stylistic concerns, which are trendy styles that we have to be aware of in mastering. But then there's also the timelessness of music, and my goal is always to win over people in the present moment and to open them up to listening and giving music a chance, but also to win them over in 20 years. You know, I imagine them listening in the future, and I want them to be excited in a timeless way down the line. So to me, it's the same gig, no matter the style, no matter the quality of the mix, no matter the success level of the artist. You know, I sit down and do my professional thing, you know, with love in my heart for whatever people have given me, because they love it. And I need to find something in it to love and enhance every day. You know, and it's a very consistent gig for me, but people think of it on the outside as having all this nuance of style and all of the idiosyncrasies of what they put into it. They think that's what I'm thinking about. You know, some music I don't even notice that there was a, you know, baritone sax on the left channel.
Sure.
I didn't hear the baritone sax, because I'm not listening like a producer or a mixer or an artist or a sax player. I'm listening from the mastering standpoint. I'm listening to connection. I'm listening to intimacy, to elevating people's day. I'm listening to those. Those are my goals. You know, it's not the details.
You made a comment in there, Brian. You said you can't control how people judge your music, but to some extent, I think you probably. I mean, to some extent, I think you can, and that's what you try to. I would imagine that's what you try to put in there. Like, there are certain things that you know are going to rub people one way versus another, and right. I mean,
yeah. I mean, in my perspective, different from most people, because I come to mastering being a tone snob. You know, I see your amplifier behind you, and I see guitars you have, and I know that you know pedals, and so my world is guitars, guitar pedals, guitar amps, tubes, speakers, tone. The language of tone. Okay, this is my background, really. Mastering comes at the end of doing lots of other things, but tone was always my thing. I was far more interested in the tone of my guitar than I was in writing a hit song. I was more interested in the tone of the whole band or of my productions than I was selling, you know, a bazillion copies. Tone was always my thing. And in mastering, I just do only tone. And how does tone affect human beings? How does it shut them down to music or open them up to music? So yes, I mean, I like to say it, you know, with kind of a funny smile, that I'm a positive manipulator. I'm opening people up, like we talked about off tape. We talked about sort of, it's a sales thing. You're trying to win people over, right? So someone's made a record, and it's going to hit somebody in 3 seconds or 5 seconds, and they're going to judge it. They're going to judge it in 30 seconds. They may never get to track 3. You may have spent all this time. And so the mastering changes that. The mastering gives the music a chance. It gives a music a chance to connect and to win people over, because there's the cynic in everyone that wants to say, oh, I've heard this, it sucks. And there's the music lover in everyone who is dying to hear something that they love and that they can tell their friends and promote for you.
Yeah.
So I want to appeal to those people. And so to me, there's a cocktail that I work in, this land of frequency balance, transient to compression balance, harmonic distortion balance, and in a very technical sense, which may not make sense to everybody right off, but the mid versus the side. If you're looking at speakers, if you're looking at 2 speakers, the mid versus side power balance. So how the rhythmic things come across, the vocals in pop music down the middle versus the spice items. So those 4 criteria are where I'm in there literally manipulating people to give music a chance.
That's great, man. I like that. It's so challenging, man, because you got so many moving parts. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's fun because every project is different. You know, some mixes are what people would call not great mixes. Some mixes are what people would call great mixes from great mixers. You know, some records are not going to sell huge. Some, you know, are. And so I go into this sort of Zen place of it. It's the same project every day for everybody. How can we enhance this thing, win people over, song to song, you know, record to record, so that the work of these artists is given the best opportunity for them to be loved and appreciated and for their careers to grow? because that's what I wanted. When I started doing it, you had the top couple guys, and I couldn't afford them. And then you had guys that were like $100 a song. This would be like in the 90s, and they weren't very good. And it took them 3 weeks to send you back a cardboard box that really didn't seem very exciting.
Yeah.
So, I try to work quickly for everybody and make sure they get something exciting. And I try to be the mastering guy that wasn't there for me when I was an artist.
Very cool, man. So let me, if you could explain, because I don't have a handle on this, and I don't know if other people listening, but I suspect a lot of people don't either. What is the difference between mixing, mastering, and engineering? And what about mastering in particular drew you to the craft?
Yeah, so in real simple terms, there's 3 engineering steps. There's tracking engineering, which would be microphone placement, picking a mic, hooking up the preamp, picking a preamp, setting the level, maybe a compressor after the preamp. In digital world, it's, what's the A to D converter. So there's the signal path of tracking. So that's the tracking engineer. Then there's the mixing engineer, who gets the results that come from tracking. And they are the most known engineer in the music world, which is the guy or girl who's having the fun with all the faders and all the possibilities of panning and treatment and spatial effects and time delays and all that. And then there's the mastering engineer, which is the guy or girl who comes after that, who's basically dealing with an approved set of individual mixes, mixes that weren't done to flow. They weren't necessarily done with the others in mind. And we deal in the whole. We take those individual things and we turn them into not just a cohesive whole, but a musically advantageous, positively advantaged whole. In other words, each song improves or should improve through the mastering process. And then the result is a cohesive whole where each single track has gotten better, but the net result of the whole thing is that the artistic statement is better. My thing is making artists have more gravitas, having an artist sound like, a more substantial artist just through the mastering, and that comes through a lot of factors. But yeah, there's basically connection with one listener at a time is how you build that block. But at the end of the day, you want listeners to not only be connected and elevated and feel like the song was written for them, but to also feel like, wow, this is a great record. This is a great song. This is a great record. This is a great artist. This person is this team of people, whatever. They're legit, and this is something that I want to buy into. This is making my life better. This is uplifting. This is positive for me. This is something I want to believe in. So all of that, most all mastering engineers will never talk about it that way. They think of the mastering gig as being a little to a lot more anemic. It's more like level out the tracks, balance out the EQs, and be done with it. And I have a very aggressive sort of guitar player, don't give a fuck mentality.
Yeah.
I go at every project like with my taste, which is, I don't care what it is. I usually kind of think it sucks. And that's not to be an asshole about it.
No, you have to, because otherwise you're not going to. Yeah, no, I totally get. That's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah. So the only time I ever fail people is when I'm conservative with my taste.
Yeah.
And then, I'm like, oh, okay. And with the Manson record, that was an interesting story. The Tom Wally asked me to do a single, and this guy, Tom, pretty well known in the business. He was like Interscope A&R back in the 90s, and then he went on to run Warner Brothers, and he now has a small company with pretty good outreach because of all his connections, and they have Manson and a few other artists. And so he said, do this single, and I did the single. And
this is Marilyn Manson's record.
Marilyn Manson, right? It was the first Marilyn Manson record. It was like 4 years ago, maybe. And he said, well, that was nice, but what we wanted was a little more hip hop low end and like a Def Leppard vocal. Now, that language may not make sense to anyone, but it makes sense to me because I'm in the job of I'm in the day-to-day gig of interpreting people's like crazy interpretations, of what music is. So I said, oh, well, that's what I would have done, I thought to myself, if I wasn't being careful. I said, give me 10 minutes. And I just went in 5 minutes and I redid it. He said, oh, that's perfect. So that was 4 years ago. I think that was the last time that I stopped myself from just going for it completely, because of the stature of the artist or my respect for the situation. So I have a healthy, disrespectful respect for what I get in. I'm going to make it cool, in my opinion, and I'm going to give it to you for revisions. And that works well.
That's cool. It's interesting. I read an article today. There's a guy who studies the science of practicing, like why people don't succeed necessarily that are on stage as well when they're practicing. And he looks into things like Olympic sports. Why do certain athletes achieve success in a practice situation, but not in the actual competition? And one of the things he said, it was interesting. I read this just this morning. He said that one of the problems is when you practice, you're very structured. You're methodical. When you perform, the only way you can achieve that, zone space is when you're totally free.
Right. It's like the opposite.
Yeah, right. And he said, and that's the problem. You're practicing in the one, and I'm sort of hearing like, you go in there and you're like, fuck it, we're not practicing. This is like performance every day. I've got to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's performance. I mean, I don't gig anymore and I don't miss it. I perform in here.
Yeah.
I perform when I get the record and I lay it out and I track the track and I do tips and tails and I start my process of going through it with this step and that step. And it's very much like it's not a science project for me. It's an art show. It's a street performance.
Yeah.
I might do a record in an hour today that would have used to have taken me, maybe would have taken me 6 hours or taken me 5 days or who knows. So as I get older, I keep getting quicker at it because it is kind of it's like a performance skill where you just kind of go for it. And there's a certain threshold that you're going for. You can kind of imagine each track, 5-song EP or 12-song record. Each track is like a ball, and you're juggling the balls, and you're trying to get them all up as high as you can. And you might get 1 and 4 and 6 up high, and then you think the rest need to come up, and then the rest come up, and then all of a sudden 7 and 10 and 12 are higher than the rest. Okay, well, maybe we can get all the rest to go up to that level. And you keep sort of getting these balls to go up as high as they can. You get them to a point where they're all peaking out, and at that point, you send it off. But it's very much a performance mode for me. I go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people want from me. And so it works out. It took me a while to really embrace that that's what I was doing. And I fully embrace it now, obviously.
Do you ever have an issue, or how did you stop not having the issue of the same thing every other creative has, is when is good enough? Because that's the fucking head problem that we all have.
Well, that's a really great question, and what I kind of figured this out as an artist making records. So it's easy now because I figured this process out then, and the way I like to think of it, and hopefully this will make sense to people. If not, it's okay. You can certainly disagree, but I think of it in terms of like a scale, like a 0 to 100 scale, and when a thing gets to like what I call the 90% point, that to me is the sufficiency level where the quality is high, but you haven't gotten caught up yet in perfectionism and fear. And so when you get to 90, you could push it to 91, but it would take, you're at 90 because it would take about as much effort to get to 91 as it took to get to 90.
Yeah, the ROI, the incremental ROI is just diminishing only.
Yeah. And so if you can let it go at 90 and say, well, all engineering, really all of life is step by step. So if you're in an engineering step, whether it be setting up the kick drum mic or working on the mix or mastering a song, if you get to this 90% point, you kind of have a feel for what that is by practicing it. Then when you move on from that, you actually get an emotional and a physical bump. You get a momentum bump. As opposed to if you go to 91, you may have improved the single song or the single step by that little percent, but you lose the bump. And that momentum bump to me is everything, because in music, momentum is everything. In business, momentum is everything. In relationship, momentum is this huge component in life that really is more important than a lot of things and is undervalued. So when I get to 90% with a track, just like, back when I was mixing my own stuff or recording or whatever, you have to learn somehow over time to just let it go and trust that if you do a bunch of steps at the 90% point, the sum ends up being, much greater. You end up, I used to say when we make records, you make a surprise.
Yeah.
If you do a record that goes from the moment of inspiration to arrangement to pre-production to tracking to mixing to mastering, if it goes through all these steps and each sub-step in those steps, you do this kind of 90% concept. The record you make is much cooler than you thought it was going to be.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because that's the nature of creativity. We can't really imagine where we're going. We only imagine where we want to go or where we think we'll go. Yeah. But if we're truly creative, things come into the process that are beneficial that we couldn't have known. So the whole point to the process for me is knowing when you're at that, what I call 90% point. And I apologize if the numbers are not everybody's forte, but I'm kind of a numbers guy, and that sort of makes sense to me.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. I always talk about, like, when you're starting a business, any project it's always a grind in the beginning. It's like a plane, and you need a lot of power to get that quote momentum that you just said. And once it's off the ground, then you could ease up. But to continue pushing that, you don't really need it, Yeah, and it's overkill.
And I think too, when you're doing a good thing for yourself, I'm a very spiritual person. I think there's grace, not religious grace. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. I think the universe is sort of benevolently constructed, that there's a fundamental creative energy behind everything. Okay. Now, not everyone would agree with that, and that's okay. But to me, there's a fundamental benevolent creative energy behind everything. And I call that sort of the divine, if you will. So it's not a religious concept, but there's something there. And the way the divine acts in people's lives, I believe, is through what we might call grace, which is where you're doing something. You're going down the road of your business or your song or your mastering job or your tracking or your guitar practice or whatever you're doing, and something beneficial comes in, something helpful comes in that you don't control. And when that happens, if you can embrace it, well, that's a momentum bump right there. So even when you're beginning a business or beginning something, I believe there is actual momentum help if we're available to it.
Yeah.
The trick is that we tend to be in the way of our own help.
Many times.
Something I learned from Robert, actually. Robert Fripp has a lot of great, one-liners, and the help is always available, but we're not always available to the help, would be a paraphrase of one of those. Yeah.
Good stuff, man. What made you open Magic Garden Mastering, like, initially?
Well, through the 90s, I was still very much a guitar player. In my mind, I was always going to be a guitar player. And I had gotten frustrated with the results of studios that I could pay for. At the time, it was like $50 an hour. Today, it still can be $50 an hour. Unfortunately, the rates are not going up for the engineers. And so I kind of naively thought, well, I could do this myself. I hit a point in the mid 90s where it was like, I'm going to stop recording or I'm going to learn how to do it myself. And I thought, well, I can't really stop recording. That doesn't make sense. So I took out a crazy mortgage on my house. I had a $65,000 house, and I got like a $30,000 loan. And I bought some gear, and it was some modest stuff. And of course I didn't like it because I'm a tone. I didn't know it at the time.
And of course I didn't like it. It was like so nonchalant.
Then I start piling up the credit card debt, being equipment and going through all this. And I get myself a pretty nice studio by the end of the 90s. And I learned some skill by trial and error. And I'm okay. I'm not great, but I'm okay. And then I'm able to sort of put out records, and then the mastering thing came in, and I never thought twice about it. Never thought twice about it. And same problem there. Wasn't happy with what I could afford. I couldn't afford Bob or, people who I now compete with, fortunate to say. And I was like, well, maybe I can figure that out too. And of course, today everyone does that. The DIY thing today it's not a big deal. But in the 90s, it was still kind of like, what the fuck are you thinking?
Yeah. So
mastering just came right at the end of the process of being an artist and then being an engineer. And it was like, it is the last step in the production process. And it was the last step for me. And I just started kind of tinkering around with it in the beginning. It wasn't any kind of a commitment. There was no light bulb that went off until much later. And in the early 2000s, I would be recording, producing, mixing in a band, and mastering all at the same time. And that was fun. It was a little crazy. And then over time, mastering just took over. It took over because of a lot of reasons, mostly because it was the right thing to do. But it just eventually took over. So it was a very organic process. I never I didn't set out to do this life. It was more like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next step?
Like almost like it chose, not to be like all zen about it, but it chose you in a sense because it was just the path. Yeah,
I mean, I think if you if you go through life worrying too much about where you're going to end up, you don't take the steps to get there. Again, I'm starting to quote Robert Fripp here, but one of his many good ones. If we don't know where we're going, we'll probably get there.
Well, there's a corollary thought to that. And the corollary thought to that is if you don't plan out your life, someone else is going to plan it for you. So, and there's merit to that, and then they talk, let's like, who Jim Rohn is?
Jim Rohn. I know the name, but I don't know who that is.
He's like a self-development guy, but he's passed, but he was really popular like in the 90s and early 200s.
Like a pre-Anthony Robbins kind of guy.
Yeah, but he was not as he was not as cheesy. He was very.
He wasn't a jump around bodybuilder.
Yeah, he was like from a farm in Idaho, and he's like the kind of dad you listen to him and like, if your dad was an asshole, you'd look at him and say, "Man, I wish that was my dad." Although he was probably an asshole to his own kid, but whoever.
Exactly.
Because he was never home.
He was the imaginary dad.
He was the imaginary dad that everybody might want. He always had this like farm boy advice. I'm like, shit, man.
Right.
Your delivery is awesome. I just like want to lull. It's kind of like voice will lull you to sleep.
Totally.
Charm you to sleep.
Yeah. But I would take that. I guess I would take it even a step further. I would say you've got to have a plan, but then you've got to be flexible every second of that plan. And that's the balance. You got to have an intention, but your intention has to include, creative play and openness to inspirational things and openness to grace, as I've defined it in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's that, creative living really is the trick. I mean, I'm fortunate to have some very wise teachers in my life. And one of them said to me in like 92 or 3, well, Brian, I'm much less interested in your creative endeavors than I am your creative life. And I didn't know what that meant, and I thought about it and I talked to her about it. And we really came up with this idea that creative living is the trick. Creative activities are cool and those are great, but actually creative living is the thing where you're doing what you're talking about, where you have a plan.
Yeah.
And you're going down the road of this plan, but at any moment the thing can shift, and it reminds me of the what is, I think, famous to a lot of people, the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech, where he talks about, he was at this moment and he had some options and he chose that thing. And then he was in this moment and he had some options and he chose that thing. That's a great example of what she was trying to teach me back in the day, which was the whole creative living concept. That you just kind of, you go with a plan, but you also have flexibility.
Yeah.
And you balance those two things, and then you end up with a kind of a surprise result. Similar to songwriting. Similar to engineering a record, where you get to that 90% point, you get the momentum bump, you don't fall into fear and perfectionism, you move on to the next step, And when the thing is said and done, at the end of all these steps, you're like, oh shit, that's greater than I could have hoped for.
Yeah.
You know? So it's that same kind of philosophy that I've been sort of working on for a long time, you know, with the help of some wise people who challenged me to think a little bit outside the box.
And by the way, I wasn't challenging in that, because I actually think you have to be open and flexible to like the universe or some, you know, karmic shit out there, you know?
Totally.
And follow kind of that. So, yeah, it's just one of those things you always want the concrete answer that doesn't exist. You want the roadmap.
Science is black and white. Everything else is negotiable.
Degrees of gray. Yeah, man.
You know?
So I want to talk about some of the artists you've worked with, and I was curious how you wound up meeting with them, and if you had maybe a cool or interesting story about working with them. And you mentioned Doyle a couple of times. Love the guy, love his playing. So I'll start with him, Doyle Bramhall II.
Well, you know, I've got a couple stories, but not as many probably as you would think, because again, my gig is like, you know, we don't hang out here in the studio and have a cocktail. You know, it's like, I get it when it's done, and there's someone who refers, and then I go through that group of decision makers. With Doyle, I'm trying to think, how the heck did I meet Doyle? I don't even know. I'm not going to have a pretty sexy answer for that one. I think he just called one day. I don't know what he heard. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've sort of become closer on this second record. We've talked more, and you know, we just did it. So I've talked to him recently. I talked to him yesterday. I sent a CD off to Eric Clapton to check out, because he does a guest appearance. There's a Norah Jones guest appearance. There's Tedeschi Trucks Band guest appearance. But yeah, I mean,
is that perfunctory in many cases? What if these guys come back, or does that not happen? Because it's not their work, and they say, hey, you need to, you know, turn up the bass and give me more of a Def Leppard vibe, or what, you know, whatever, like, right. You know, is, you know, or it's not their gig. Does that?
Yeah. I mean, every record is going to have decision maker or makers. Yeah. Right. So my goal is to deal with those people. And if I'm not dealing with them, I have to sort it out pretty quickly, you know, via the email or the phone, because if I'm getting mixed messages.
Oh my God. Yeah. You've got to.
You're right. It's like anything in business. You're like, wait a minute.
The clusterfuck. Who the hell are you working for here?
Right. Give me the lady or the man in charge of this situation. I don't got time for this shit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, you know, like Doyle runs his own show. So I talk with him, but with like you mentioned, Manson, I've talked to him once at a party for 2 seconds.
Okay.
That would be Tyler Bates, because Tyler's the producer and he and Manson are the production team. With other artists, it's the label. Like with Liam Gallagher, it was the president of Sony in the UK, and I spoke with him. So in every instance, it's something different. Gotcha. You mentioned the Black Keys, and that's either Dan or Pat or both. You know, because they run that. Yeah. So yeah, it's always a different setup. You know.
Well, is there anybody, let me turn this on to you then. Any cool stories or interesting stories you have with any of the artists you work with?
Well, I have one kind of fun story that I've told before that I like. And it has to do with the Black Keys. The first record I did was Brothers, which really, you know, it opened my career up to a global audience. You know, I did the same work the day before it came out, but nobody knew what that was, you know.
Isn't that great?
Right.
That's amazing.
and the months and the years before that record came out, I had you know, an intention. I had a wish. I had a prayer. I had a vision that if I just do what I do with a high integrity and high quality, that maybe someday somebody will hear it on a bigger scale than what I was getting, which was, you know, records that probably never had more than 1,000 sales. I I would say up to that record. No, that's not true. Maybe there was.
No, it had to be more than 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few that were maybe 10,000 or something, but
sure.
But it still wasn't like a breakthrough kind of a global record, right? So I always had this intention of, it'd be great if that would happen, and it happened in a very interesting way because I had just broken up with a long-term relationship. I was very down about it. And I was actually very, very low. It was about as low as I can remember ever being. And I asked, I sort of asked the universe for help. I said, I'm not doing good here. And 54 minutes later, I got a call from their management and said, would you be available to do this Brothers record mixed by Chad Blake?
54 minutes. Dude, that is like really good time.
So that was good.
That's very responsive universe.
That's a responsive universe.
Shit.
But before that, the maybe even more interesting and funnier story was when I met Dan, which was Dan Auerbach called me probably in 2008, and a very, very a humble voice, quiet guy, and he said, "Hi, my name's Dan. I'm a producer from Akron. This would be Akron, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, 2 hours away. Hi, Dan, how are you?" He said, "Well, I'm just wondering, how your work kind of compares to, other people's work. Like I've used Bob Ludwig and I've used Sterling Sound." And I said, "Well, ironically at the time I'd been thinking about how to answer this question. It was kind of a question on my mind. And I said, well, people who've worked with me say the work is as good or better in some cases, but those are like very famous people. You're talking about legitimate legacy type names in our industry. They're in a major city. I'm here in Columbus, and I don't put myself in that category, but in terms of the work, the work is great, and I'd be happy to show you. Just send me a record and we'll do it, and then you tell me what you think. You be the judge."
Yeah.
Something like that. And he said, yeah, that made sense to him, and he wanted to do a record. And so we did the record. I first did with Dan when he was acting as producer, and this is a band called, I think it was Hacienda. It was Hacienda's first record with him. And so we go through the process of this, and I was a lot, sort of slower then, and he was in a lot slower pace too. Things hadn't blown up in 2008 like they did later for them. And sort of we went back and forth on this record for like 3 weeks, and he was Dan, the producer from Akron. And we get into this record and we start, I'm really enjoying it. There's some really hard panned left, right, center 60s stuff. There's some drums on the left, and there's some, really cool fuzzy bass. And there's a lot of sounds that you now take for granted because Dan brought those sounds into the mainstream in the years that followed. But at the time, I hadn't heard that in a long time, and I hadn't heard it since I listened to vinyl growing up. And I was like, this is cool.
Right.
So I was really intrigued by this guy from Akron and what he was doing. And we started talking. I said, "Hey, well, how'd you do this?" "Oh, I think it was 8-track tape." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's that fuzz box." Or, we get into the kind of the nitty gritty of some of the gear and this kind of thing. And so it was cool. And I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." So then a few weeks into this, the record's pretty much done. He's happy. I'm going to send him a CD because, again, back then we did a lot of CDs. We don't today, although I just mentioned sending one. So I'm going to send you a CD. And he says, "Well, I'm going on tour starting tomorrow. I'm going to be in Arizona or in Phoenix. I'm going to be in Phoenix tomorrow on tour. So send it to this address." And at that moment, I've just like question marks in my face. I was like, what in the hell is going on? Akron, Ohio.
Dan, the producer
in Akron. You're talking about Chicago is close to Akron. Pittsburgh is close. Columbus, Nashville. You could go to New York. There's a lot of places you could go. Why are you going to Phoenix?
Yeah.
Who starts their tour in Phoenix, and what gig is there in Phoenix, right? So in that moment, my curiosity was piqued, and I Googled his name. Up comes, of course, a million pages of the Black Keys.
Right.
And I emailed him back. I'm like, "Dude, you're the Black Keys!" ! And he wrote back. He said, "Yeah, that's me."
Very cool, man.
So we went like a month of just, like living in a world where he was Dan, the producer from Akron, and that was what he wanted to do, and it was great, and that's how we met and got to know each other, was on a nice sort of creative music making level.
Do you think he did that because it would evoke a more, not natural response, but a more, we talked about before we started the call, authentic a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I can't know what was in his head, but it felt good. It felt like the right thing, and then soon after that, it wasn't long after that, I met Pat, who's also just very, just a really authentic guy, and to this day, every time I see him, he thanks me profusely. He's very gracious. And at this point, I talk to Pat more than Dan, and Pat's always like, dude, thank you so much, and it's so great. And he sends me records, and he sent me the Kills records, and he sends me every friend that he has that he can. And so
that's awesome.
A couple of good Ohio guys. They're a generation or two under me, but we're still sort of cut of the similar cloth.
Well, let me look up the record, and I just don't know the title of the song, but the beginning of it is just so freaking cool. I'm Not the One. I just couldn't think of the title. When it opens up there, that is mad.
Just the badass kind of drum groove.
Well, beyond the drum groove is the I don't even, it's almost like the distortion of the amp rattling the drum.
Yeah.
That, when I heard that, and I just listened to this last week, and every time I listen to it, it's like, it's like listening to a live concert.
Yeah.
That is so fucking cool.
It's interesting with them at the time. When I did Brothers, going now forward back to from 2008 to 2010, it was in February of that year after I mentioned I had the low point and they called. When I started doing it, the second song, which was, oh gosh, what is the second song? It was, I think it was the third track, Tighten Up, which ends up being a big single. And was licensed like a bazillion times. So this song has a kind of what I'd call falling down the stairs, kind of a drum groove to it, which is part of its charm. And there's a moment, like a minute 10, I forget, it's been a long time, but there's a moment in it where it almost sounds like there's a mistake. And I thought to myself, well, that could be intentional, knowing how these guys roll, and sort of the humanness and authenticity of what they're doing. Like you're saying with the other track, sort of like a live band kind of vibe.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just going to check, I just want, so I reached out and I said, hey, this moment, and they said, yeah. They came back with, we do that on purpose. We leave these things in to make it more real. That's part of how we roll. It's not techno, it's meant to be very human. And I was like, cool. I thought maybe that was the case, but I wasn't sure. Just wanted to check, so that's part of their aesthetic,
Very cool, man.
And that was a good thing. It was an exciting thing for me as a musician that kind of aesthetic became popular and really kind of opened up the door to a lot of sort of more organic things at the time, and maybe today still does, but it definitely there was kind of a big wave of more organic pop rock things, that were on the Grammy stage for a period of a few years.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Of all the projects you've done, I don't even know if this is an answerable question. If you had to pick a top three, either because of the relationships involved or the quality of the experience or the fun factor or the pride factor in the quality of your work, what would be your top three?
Yeah, that's hard. That's sort of contrary to how I go about it every day.
Yeah, I know. And that's part of what I was saying. This is going to be hard.
Yeah. I mean, I want to answer it for you. I want to think about it. Well, I guess I'd have to put Brothers in there. We've talked about it because it was the record that made me known international way. And it's a really cool record. And I think it'll be really cool for the rest of my life. I think it's just a cool record.
Yeah.
And so I think that has to be in there for me. I think maybe, gosh, I don't know. And which one of your kids do you love the best?
I know which one I like the least. No, I'm just kidding.
I could do that, but I would be in trouble. No.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm so much like a job of the day guy. Like it's today, and I'm like, okay, what am I doing today? What's our schedule today, honey? Let's live today. Now, having said that, I want to try and answer the question. Definitely Brothers. I think in an odd way, I'm going to put the Showman soundtrack in there.
Man, I had a funny feeling you were going to say that, actually.
Because it's the opposite. It's like not a thing. It's not a thing I ever would listen to. It's not my style. It's not, Brothers comes from my wheelhouse. Right. It's like cool rock guitar player band with Ohio guys. Showman is but it's an international thing. And my goal shifted over time, to become really kind of a big goal, which was to upgrade, uplift, inspire, the world, to
make the world a more musical place, man.
Make the world a more
dude, you got to put that on your website now.
Making the world a more musical place, one record at a time. Yeah. So the Showman is just, I wouldn't have expected that. I did not think twice about it when I was doing it. And
that's so cool.
So many people have, we went and saw the movie, and the movie's really fun. It's a beautiful movie, and the songs make more sense in the movie context. I hear the songs out of context, and I'm just like, what in the hell? But I see them in the movie. It's like, oh, I love these songs. These are great. Greg Wells, great job. All the producers, great job. The artists, great job. And it's a good movie. I love the underdog story. I love all the freaks becoming loved and popular. I love what Barnum did, at least as it was portrayed. A lot of people hated on Jackman for his performance. I don't get that. I thought it was a really good performance. He made being an attractive white male, he broadened that over into being somebody really cool and who was a representative for the underdogs. He wanted to get paid, but he wanted those people to get paid too, and I like that. Yeah. So I like the movie a lot, and the record was just such another job of another day, but has really uplifted so many people's lives.
And it's just, let's face it, man, it's nice to do something that you just took as another job of the day, and like, holy shit, look at the hell that happened to it.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's like, what? That's a great experience, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a total surprise.
Yeah.
Brothers, nice. I heard, and I said to them before it was done, I said, this is going to win Grammys, and this is going to be a great record for 20, 30 years. I could tell from the mixes. This was the opposite. This was job of the day, a style I'd never done, which again contradicts the theory people have about mastering being style dependent. And it's a wonderful record, and it's had a wonderful positive effect on, millions and millions of people. Sure. So I got to put that one in there. Now the third one, this could be a little harder. One funny story about Showman is that the day after I shipped it out and I built it, and I wasn't sure how to build that one, but when I saw the names that were on, I said, okay, well, this is major label.
You mean what scale on the sliding scale? Oh, that's right. Fucking right at the top. Trust me.
I wasn't sure, but then I saw the names. I saw Jackman, Efron. Okay, it was through Fox or whatever. So
you might double the top for that for that one.
If I was so inclined, that would have been the time to do it.
Yeah.
Or taking a point would have been even better.
Oh God.
But mastering doesn't get a point. Damn it. Anyway, so I send the bill, proper top line billing, fine, no problem. And the next day, because we get here at the house, we get Amazon deliveries like most of the world. We're putting mom and pop out of business. Sorry. So we get Amazon the next day, and the Greatest Showman is like on the box. It's stamped all over the box. And I thought, oh shit. this is going to be something.
Yeah.
But that didn't actually take off right away. It came out sort of in December last year, and it took a while. But a few weeks in, it just, it went crazy. But
they did some PR, because like we were watching. My wife's from the UK, so we watch like British shows. So we were watching Graham Norton.
Yes.
And they did like a whole, they did the whole like a radio tour, except it's not called a radio tour for this, the TV tour, I guess, and that was
right.
They did a bunch of that. And I think after that happened, that was part of the volume.
Yeah. They certainly had a promotional budget, and it certainly all paid off. So, hey, good for them. Okay. So we had the breakthrough, and then we had the surprise. And in between that, that is so tough. So many records that I do, you try not to like them more than others when you're doing them, but when they're done, there are ones that I'll play in the car. There are ones that become part of our life here at the house. There's things that are like, that's cool, not in the moment when you're doing them, but later they linger. And I would put a lot of like the cool rock records in there. I listen to those, but the one that's kind of popping in my head is this single song that is part of an album I did for Ani DiFranco. And it's not a popular record. Her career is, in a very evolved place. And I have no idea if anybody bought this record. It was mixed by Chad Blake, who I've worked with a lot, and I love Chad's work. But it's this one song in particular, and I'm forgetting the title.
Wait a minute. So it wasn't mixed by you? Oh, it was mastered by you, though.
Mastered by me.
Yeah. Okay.
Mixed by Chad Blake.
Yeah,
and Chad mixed Brothers. He mixed a lot of records I've done. The Arctic Monkeys AM record, a lot of stuff.
And, is there like a, for lack of a better word, a circle that you guys all have? Like this guy, there's one of 3 or 4 guys who often does the mixing. One of 3 or 4 guys who those guys or gals will refer to do the mastering. I'm sure it's a close community. I mean, this is not like,
Yeah. What happens is that people go through relationship phases over time.
Yeah.
So an artist will work with a mixer, and then they might try another one. They might come back. They might have a rapport with the mixer. Mastering engineers tend to fall into the kind of the 3 categories of like, that wasn't good, that was good enough, that was amazing.
Yeah.
If people are in the good enough stage, they'll tend to stay there. I like to give people the amazing experience, but I have to wait for them to want to move from the good enough phase, or they hear it from somebody else, or they hear my record and they contact me. So the mastering cycles tend to go a little slower. Mixer cycles maybe a little quicker. But yeah, people running, we're pack animals. We run in groups, and the groups change over time.
Sure.
So like Doyle that you mentioned has a relationship with Chad. Chad mixed the first single on his new record. Ani has an old relationship with Chad. So he did this record, the full mixing of the record. And I'm trying to think of this song. This is it's one single track. And I bring it up because I think intuitively, and I do not claim to be an expert on her catalog, but I've heard over the years, from the 90s, I've heard her catalog here and there. And mostly I just know, I know a lot about the general history of music. And this one song that she's done recently, although she's made probably 20, 30 records, I think is just the greatest single sort of feminist anthem that I've ever heard. And I want to give this track some love. The album is called Binary. And the album was done, when was the album done? A few years ago. And it's track 4. It's called Play God.
Oh, great title. Play God.
Yeah. And it's basically super groovy track. Like the music track is great. If you just heard the music track, you would be like, that's a badass, funky, energetic track. The mix from Chad is fantastic. It plays into his creative style of mix. He does lots of crazy hard panning. He does hard filtering. He does little short ambiances. He's very aggressive with the way he treats tracks. He doesn't believe in naturalism. It's all processed, and he just embraces that completely. He's a mangler, and he's a proud mangler, and he's got
he's a mangler. I like that.
Yeah, and because he has got great taste, it works out.
Yeah,
and his mangled stuff sounds more natural than natural in many cases.
Yeah,
he can intentionally distort and intentionally filter and pan to make something sound like you think it would sound in your head, but you could never get it that way from a natural sort of live rendering.
So, anyway. So that thing on the opening of the drum, the drum rattling, the snare drum rattling, was that engineered in, or was that actually rattling from the volume of the guitar?
Well, it would have been both. So Chad he mixed all of Brothers, so he would have embraced every noise. You know, he would have left the channels open where someone else would have muted them.
Okay.
In the 80s, they used, like ducking, like, oh, let's perfect everything, and then we'll stick a reverse reverb on there, and it'll be in the air tonight, So there's all these theories of mixing. There's all these theories and concepts that have gone through phases over time. And Chad's thing is just straight up like balls to the wall creativity, where he mangles everything and doesn't go for any appearance of naturalism. So, he would heavily compress or limit, bring up every noise, leave that channel open. That's the kind of stuff he would do. Unless somebody tamps him down, he's going to just let it fly. Like the weirder, the better.
So it's very congruent. It's very congruent with you.
Yeah, we get along.
I mean, because your style, you're going to go in there and go do your thing. Yeah, you're not going to hold back, as you said.
We're a good team in that regard. You can be a good team for different reasons, but sure. if you want two people who are kind of going for it in a certain direction, we both kind of go for it in a certain direction. And we both really like low end. So he aggressively filters low end, but his low end is big, and then I can even take it further. Whereas if somebody else's mixes, I still am going to do my thing with low end, because I like woofers that move air. So I like real low end that's punchy. That gives you the Africa, the rhythm, the dance. The physicality of music is in the kick drum and in the low bass. And then I like the low mid range of music, which is the intimacy, the humanism, the natural kind of warmth that kind of hits you in the chest, gets you in the heart. And so he and I align, but I'll do that with anybody too. So, it's 6 1 half dozen the other. But anyway, so back to this track, Play God. I recommend everyone take a listen to it. It's a really funky, cool track, great mix, and the lyrics just completely, it's just the best feminist anthem. I won't sing it. I won't state it. I'll just say, have a listen to it. Listen to it a couple times so you can really get it, because she gets kind of rapping in there. She's kind of quick with her delivery, and but she says a lot, and I think it's just a pinnacle, in my opinion, with all due respect to her, huge career and catalog. I think it's a pinnacle moment for what she does, and it almost brought me to tears when you first listen to a song, you don't, you got to peel the onion. You don't necessarily get it right away.
Yeah, sure.
But as I kind of got into it, I was just like, wow. If I was a female and if I was making music like she'd made, and if that was my goal, like this would be it. This is badass. It's a badass statement. It's fun. It's not overly serious, but it's deadly serious. And to be able to do strong female and be fun and funky and just conceptually slay the topic, I love that track. So I'm going to throw that in as number 3.
All right, cool. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a legitimate question or not, and if it's not, feel free to tell me. From a mastering standpoint, I was curious which guitars typically sound the best and the worst, or the most or the least consistent. If that's an answerable question.
Yeah, it's really not answerable. What matters about guitars is, like everything else in production, it's just the chain and how they're treated and how they function in context.
Okay.
So, I mean, full well you can make a Stratocaster sound pretty close to a Les Paul if you mess with it right.
Yeah.
And you can't necessarily make a Les Paul sound like a Strat, so that's kind of out. But you can make it sound more like a Tele, and that's just at the recording stage. Then when you get into production, there's such a amazing amount of processing available. So really, a guitar, like a kick drum, like anything, in a proper mix setting, it's just a color palette. And unless you're making a guitar-based record, it just becomes another sort of option. But even going back to Doyle, because again, I just finished that record and we've talked about it. That's a guitar-based record, but he's got some things going on in there that are sort of all over the board tonally. And I'm not so sure that he's too attached to it, because he's got the musical awareness to be about the song.
Mm.
And so, the tone starts something, and maybe by the end it ends up something. And when I'm done with it, it ends up something else. And, those details end up being of service to the bigger picture.
Sure.
They serve either the song, and ultimately the song serves the artist and the record. It all ends up kind of on the pyramid of priorities. So yeah, that's a tough one to, kind of drill down on.
Totally get it. Let's have some fun, man. Desert Island Discs. Top 3, in no particular order, and just for today. So like tomorrow you could wake up and have 3 different ones.
Oh, just for today.
Just like a knee-jerk reaction.
It have to be like Led Zeppelin, something with Kashmir on it, whatever record that is.
I think it's Physical Graffiti, I think, right?
There you go. Peter Gabriel, probably. Something like, I don't know, maybe So, or maybe something earlier. I love Gabriel. And then maybe Nina Simone.
Wow, I haven't heard. That's you know what? I interviewed someone earlier today, and they said Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti.
Maybe with something with Strange Fruit on it. And
oh my God, what a song, man!
Yeah,
oh.
just for today.
Yeah, man. The imagery in that song is probably the lyrics, more intense than any other lyrics I've read in any song in my life.
Yeah.
That's
from a racism standpoint, like in that Play God song from Ani, like those are some really powerful social music that are just great music, and they make the other point.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome.
When did she die? Got to be about 15 years ago.
I have no idea. When did she die? I don't know.
Interesting. When my older son, he's 28 now, but he always liked the same kind of music, and I had turned him on to Nina. And I'll never forget when she passed, he came into my room, and I told him he was crying.
Oh,
I was really like, and we still, what's that? Yeah. So it was 15 years ago. And so he was 13 at the time. So I'll never forget that, because he came in, it was like a very tender moment. I was like, wow, that was, we still talk about that.
There's like, there's Ellie, and there's Aretha, and there's Etta James, and there's Billie Holiday, and there's so many women that you might put kind of in her category for whatever reason, black female, blah, blah, blah. But there's just something about her that for me, it's like, there's something in her tone and in her content, and it comes from her spirit. That's just, if I was going desert island, I'd be like, well, I need me some Nina Simone, because that's just cool.
That being said, if you saw her autobiography on Netflix, she was a mess, very unstable, unforgiving human being.
I'm sure. Yeah, I can believe that. I'm not inviting her to the island. I'm just saying.
She'd kick your ass, man.
She's not coming to the island. She wouldn't like it. White boy. No,
she
probably
would kick your ass. Yeah, she was pretty disturbed.
Yeah,
and actually quite abusive.
Yeah,
which was really, like reminded when I saw it. Never meet your heroes.
Yeah,
kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have stories about those things, but we can't do that.
No, that's good, man.
We can't go there. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's just how it goes sometimes.
Hey, tough question. What do you like most about yourself?
Oh gosh. What do I like most about myself? Oh, that is a tough question. I guess what I like most about myself. Wow. I guess that would have to be I've always been sort of blessed with knowing who I am and who I'm not. Like knowing what I can do and what I can't.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, I had this horrible English teacher who had tenure at my basically very good high school. It was a public high school in the white suburb of Columbus, or Worthington. But this woman was this older woman, and she was terrible. And she asked us to write this paper, like this huge paper, and it was, I don't even remember what it was. It was just the dumbest fucking thing. And I tried, and it was outside of my authenticity as a person. I just couldn't write it. I literally could not write it. And I talked to my mom at the time. She's like, "That's not that you can't, it's that you won't. You're not making the effort." And I'm like, "No, I can't do this. Like, I cannot." And I turned in the papers, and the paper was like a 2-sentence essay. It was supposed to take 6 weeks. And I said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. McDonald, I cannot write this paper. I have nothing to say about this topic." And she gave me a C. And that's kind of that. I guess that's what I like most, is that I've always sort of trusted my own authenticity, and I encourage that in others as well.
Well, that's why you were good at what you do, man, because you're encouraging that same thing.
Yeah,
through your
encourage
music.
that in other people. So I guess that's a tough question.
It is, man.
More tough questions. I'm getting nervous.
Yeah, they're all downhill from here, man.
Okay.
Something or someone you miss from your childhood.
Something or someone I missed from my childhood. Something or someone I missed from my childhood. Well, gosh, that's, I guess, probably my dad. When I was a kid, my dad left my mom when I was 3, but we stayed close, and we had fun together. And kind of the whole family had fun. I had a family that was inclusive. There was no stepdad, dad thing that I could tell until I got older, of course, then I could tell. But when I was young, there was just a sense of a loving inclusiveness. I was very fortunate to have a good mom and stepdad. And even though my father left, he was an alcoholic, and he was imperfect, as we all are. But we had a good time, and we had some joy when I was really young that I miss. Like everybody probably would say, it was a simpler time.
That's nice, man. Is your dad passed now, I'm assuming?
He did. He passed in 2013.
Sorry about that, man.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. He had a good run.
Tell me something about yourself people would either be surprised to hear or might find a little odd.
Well, I like to watch some pretty dumb TV shows. I veg out to TV. I like watch sports, and I watch CSI, and I've got my veg out kind of dumb. I mean, people
sports?
Think of me
as
well. Sports isn't dumb, but I watch Hawaii Five-0, or I watch shows that people think I'm like a serious smart person a lot of times. Like I would never do these sort of things, and I'll just watch the dumbest show, or a rom-com. I'll cry.
Okay.
I love a good rom-com. That sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's not maybe I'm not exposing much, but
No,
I don't think
that's not that odd.
I don't think that would be that odd, really.
No. Come on, Brian. We need some odd shit. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to really.
No, I want you to be authentic. That's the answer. That's great, man.
These are my authentic answers. Yeah, I like veg out to rom-com and stupid network television shows.
You know what? I don't usually watch a lot of rom-coms. There's one I watched that I like. I actually watched it twice. It's called Sliding Doors. Have you ever seen that?
I've never heard of that one.
So here's why I like it. It's a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, and it talks about, and I like it because this is how life works. It shows two alternative realities. In one alternative reality, she's running down the stairs to catch the train, and she's late, and this little girl stands in front of her, so she misses the train. In the other alternative reality, this little girl's there, but the mom snags her out of the way, and she gets to catch the train. And it just shows you how two meaningless, otherwise seemingly meaningless events change the total destiny. So I kind of like that. It was like why I liked Vanilla Sky. It was like consequences. It was about choices and stuff.
I didn't see that one. It makes me think of Interstellar, which a lot of people pan, but it was about the sort of the way the whole space-time continuum is very fluid.
I didn't see that one. I have to look at Interstellar.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, I don't want to give it away. So I thought it was cool. It's a Matthew McConaughey movie, and Interstellar. Similar.
Person who's had the biggest influence on your life.
Oh goodness. Well, I mean, for most people, that's probably family. For me, it's got to be my mom. It was Mom and I after Dad left, and she made her decisions with remarriage. With me in mind. I have an older brother, half brother, but he was taken away from my mom by the sexist court system of the 60s.
God almighty.
Yeah, just things that would never happen today. And so he didn't have the benefit of growing up with her. And he grew up with his dad, who recently passed. And so, he and I are like, we're remarkably similar, but we have a real difference too, is that I grew up with her and he didn't. And her influence on me is just very positive. Overall, and he didn't have that, and that's kind of what makes us to some extent different. And so it has to be my mom. My mom grew up super poor. She's from Kentucky. They had she had 4 sisters. Her father was racist, but everyone made fun of him, so it was okay. As I grew up, he was a joke. My uncles, her sisters' husbands were all strong. They were like World War II vets, and he thought wrestling was real when they throw chairs and shit, and everyone would make fun of him. And so she grew up in Kentucky, where they had double outhouse, no electricity.
Wow!
So you'd have to go to the bathroom during the day, and they would wipe their ass with the Sears catalog because it was like newsprint. And
quite frankly, Brian, a lot of people might wipe their ass with the Sears catalog.
So she went from that to living in Worcester, Ohio, and then was in Columbus, where she met my dad, and she's just a person of great integrity, and she's a tough cookie. She runs her own business. She still works every day. She's 79.
That's awesome.
And she's not perfect, but we'll skip those things. She's mostly just a really strong influence and someone I feel very fortunate
good for you,
to have had around. Yeah.
Very cool. Do you have any, we talked about this earlier, non-musical superpowers?
Well, I'm very intuitive, but I don't know if we can I guess that's non-musical. Is intuition? Does that count? Okay.
Yeah, it's not musical.
Yeah, I'm very intuitive, and I'm open to that sort of metaphysical world. I have a very dear friend who's clairvoyant, and she's been very helpful to me over the years. She's the one that.
Yeah, you had told me about that first time we talked.
I mentioned her before too in this conversation about creative living versus creative endeavors. And I still talk to her. I talk to her probably more than anybody in my family at this point. So I'm intuitive. When I'm working on records, I'm hearing how it's going to be perceived. I hear the critics, I hear the fans, I hear the dialogue in the future about about what I'm doing in the present, and that helps inform me, in my work and other things in life. But that's a kind of a maybe crazy sounding, but very real and very concrete example of intuition.
No, I think it's really valid, man, and I think it's great.
Yeah, it helps to, the more you know about what other people are thinking, it can only help to navigate the waters. And I'm not always right, I'm sure. I'm sure my intuition has its moments, but I basically trust it. There were times when I was assembling my studio when I was so dialed into what was available in the market, I could look at the products and think about the design, and I could pretty much hear them. Some of them I didn't even have to listen to. It saves time to be intuitive. And when I was a kid, I was very analytical. I grew up with a stepfather who's non-artistic. So I've got two artistic parents and then a non-artistic stepfather. So white male suburbs of the 80s, I was very much in the math and science thing. And I had to sort of unlearn that. I had to unlearn that and trust more my intuition. And it took a long time. I did it by scientific process for a long time, where I would say, okay, well, I think this is my intuition, so let me do an experiment.
You like A-B'd your intuition?
Yes. I A-B'd my intuition for years.
That's years. Great, man.
Total fucking waste of time, really. But I had to do it because I was so stuck in
the black and white of the world,
the math science thing of the white male suburban analytical 80s. Here comes life, kid. Throw that artistic shit out the window. We need you to be logical. And so I can be very logical and very rational, but I've learned to really trust intuition. So I would have to say that's definitely my superpower, although it didn't come easy.
That's not the kind of superpower that comes easy.
No. I mean, unless you're like more gifted than me.
That's like tuition based, extremely.
Yeah, unless you're smarter than me. It took me a while.
Dude, I'm going to ask you 3 more questions. They'll be easier.
All right.
First one is, any hobbies or interests outside of music and romantic comedies?
Oh yeah, I love cars. I love driving cars.
Cool.
I like driving fast. I'm a good driver. I get very relaxed when I drive. And because I sit in one spot, in a symmetrical room a lot of the day.
Yeah.
It's a great joy to just get out and drive. I've always enjoyed driving, but the more I got into studio life, I enjoyed it even more.
What do you drive? What kind of car do you drive?
Oh, I have a German car that's pretty nice, and I have an Italian car that's pretty nice.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
I spend too much money on cars, and I like to go to the track, and usually drive other people's cars and burn up their brakes and tires.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
But yeah, I love cars.
So you actually go to the racetrack and drive cars?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was available. So like, will you rent out the track for?
You rent in around LA. I mean, this is there was a place that did this in Ohio, but I didn't know it at the time. I don't know if it's still there. The Mid-Ohio track, I think that you can do this. But out here in Southern California, which is very much car culture, there are a variety of tracks where you can go other people's cars. Yeah, so I've driven Porsche GT3s and Lamborghini Huracans and every Ferrari and every Mercedes AMG GTSR, all the
wow.
You name it, you can go do it.
That's pretty cool.
Different companies have different tracks, and yeah, it's
like renting a parking space, except you're renting a track. I mean, right?
Yeah. You rent the car and the track.
Really cool.
You buy it by the laps, and it's not cheap, but those laps are intense, so you can't do 30 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that skilled. I love to watch F1, and I just imagine what they're doing, having done what I've done, and I'm just in awe, like the G-forces and the speed and the bravery. You can't, when you're driving a car like that, you can't actually go slow.
Wow.
If you slow down, you'll lose traction. You'll lose it for a variety of reasons. You'll lose grip from either aerodynamic reasons or from just different reasons. So, the faster cars go, the faster you actually have to drive them, just to keep the brakes hot, or just to keep the thing running. It's meant to run at an average speed of 180 miles an hour.
Holy crap!
The fastest I've ever been in a car is 185 miles an hour, and let me tell you, just doing it for 10 seconds, it's pretty darn fast.
Yeah, I couldn't.
So when I look at those F1 drivers and just how graceful and easy they make that thing, I think that's really cool. But yeah, I like to drive. I like cars.
Very cool. It's weird. I mean, this sounds hard to believe, but I never had something like that in the Bronx, like the racetrack.
Yeah.
So I was like, I look what I've been missing. I mean,
right.
I'm just like sheltered. Here I am thinking I got some street smarts, and I got nothing here.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. I resisted my car thing until recently.
Why? It's a nice, fun, relaxing hobby.
I don't know. I denied it in myself. I don't know. I just never embraced it. And then like 4 years ago, I was like, fuck it. I really like cars.
Yeah, fuck it. Absolutely.
That I always have. Now, someone else looking at me from the outside would probably have known. But I'm weird that way. I don't know. I'll be very liberal and loose about spending money on certain things, and then other things, like I'll like wear my socks into the ground, but spend a lot of money per month on a car, and I do these weird kind of rationalizations, and one of them was that I wasn't really into cars previous to the last 4 years, but I always spent money. I mean, I had a front engine Porsche. It was a 968 convertible, and I bought it for like 10 grand. And I had it for 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years,
holy smokes,
I totaled up what I'd spent on it in terms of repairs. And I was like, oh shit, this is like $750 a month. I could have bought a brand new anything, So I was resisting it by trying to go cheap on it, and it didn't work. So then I was like, okay, let's embrace it.
Yeah, that's like owning a boat, man. It's going to cost you regardless. You can't go low end on, skimp on that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, good for you. I'm glad you do that. You sound really cool about it. You sound like you really like it.
Well, I've embraced it. I work a lot, and then I just like to get out and take a drive.
Good for you.
Doesn't have to be the track. I like cars. I like driving.
Talk about a specific experience that either changed your life or altered the way you think about things.
Oh gosh. I feel like those happen a lot. I'm fortunate to be still challenged by growth and learning. I'm intentionally challenging myself to stay young, to not get stuck.
Yeah, man, I hear that.
It's hard. It gets harder the further on you go, because you feel like you've figured some things out, but then you can't get stuck in that. You have to really be open. So I'm still in that process of growing and learning.
You know what helps for me anyway? I hate to sound old, but I have a lot of friends that are younger, like in business.
Yeah.
And that really helps me. Just
totally.
And,
no. I was thinking that when I said it.
Yeah, really. Cause they'll clue me onto shit, and I'm always open, and they'll ask me stuff, but they'll tell me that stuff and just hanging out with my kids, even, being around them.
Totally. Well, yeah, I think that evolution is like a real thing. I think that generationally people get smarter, and a lot of people would disagree. They think the world's going to shit and da 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 da. And I actually think that there's a baseline improvement generationally in people's consciousness, in their sort of level of functioning. And yes, certain things get lost. And yes, there's much that could be improved, and all the negatives I would agree with as well. But I think fundamentally, because it's just something I've seen. I think with young people, there's one generation, 2, 3. There's things that they don't know, and they'll maybe never get because of what we went through in our era. Mm-hmm. You see those memes on social media, and yes, those are all true. But there's something they have too, in terms of a kind of a social wisdom is the new thing, and sort of a humanism that I think is just a evolutionary fact. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. It's funny, by the way, all of these guys send me memes, and my son sends me memes. I don't understand one fucking thing they ever send me.
The young ones or the old ones?
Well, my son's 28. My other buddies are in their mid to late 30s, and I'm like, my son sent me something last week. He goes, "Dad, please, if you don't get this, you've got to be an idiot." I'm like, "Call me an idiot." You
just don't get it.
No, and he's like, "Well, it's Trump, and he's trying to figure out." I'm like, "Okay, thank you." I don't get it. I just surrender. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to get that, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Right? Yeah. Well, yeah. There's definitely things. I mean, there's if you think back, like I'm 51, so I grew up so 67, so I grew up like through the 70s, and you think back to just that's not that long ago, but things were so different.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, even the 80s, before Facebook was different. That was 2005, right?
Dramatically different.
Crazy era in our lifetime to go from the civil rights and the summer of love,
right,
where we are today. I mean, I think it's a blessing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So much going on in this window of time, but yeah, we're getting a little off the point. But what was your question?
No, it's just what a specific experience that changed your life or altered the way you think about things.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I could name so many.
Yeah, there's tons of them.
There's, studying with Robert and Guitarcraft was great. Playing in New York was great. Yeah. Your question about what do I like about myself, that the thing about authenticity. Yeah. I think it all kind of goes back to something that's going to sound kind of crazy. But that's okay, because I say a lot of things that people think are crazy.
Crazy is good here, man.
I was born, and when I was born, I almost died. So I had like water in my lungs.
Holy crap!
I think there's a chance that I don't know for sure, but I think there's a chance that I had a near-death experience. So one of those moments where you could go either way.
As a baby.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like day one. So I was cut out. And I've been pissed about it, and I've been running a little late ever since. What's the cesarean? Sorry, bad joke. But no, I had like water in the lungs, and I was like the boy in the bubble, and I did all that. And the doctor said to my parents at the time, like, this could have gone either way, and he sort of, he fought through it. And I kind of wonder, because I've read up on these near-death experiences that people have, I wonder if that wasn't really an important moment. Because there's this element that I have that's kind of what I call don't give a fuckness. I have a certain don't give a fuckness about everything, which actually allows me to really care. When I say don't give a fuck, it's more like the identity or the ego thing. I'm not wrapped up in things that a lot of people seem to be wrapped up in my whole life. I always feel a bit like an outsider. And yet as an outsider, I bring a perspective that's useful. So I sort of feel like I have one foot in and one foot out of every circle I'm ever in. And I think that may have started then. It may have started way back when. And that's a kind of a crazy deep thought, but
that makes ton of sense, actually.
Yeah. Like you were saying, when you're 18 and you're in New York City and everyone's kissing your ass and you're doing this, why wouldn't you keep doing that? Well, I just kind of knew it was bullshit. I always kind of see the bullshit in things. I think it may have come from really the beginning, because I do remember being in the bubble. I remember how it looked. So I remember like my first week. I don't remember much, but I remember the visual of when I was, a week old. So something might have happened then in the beginning that was pretty important.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I don't know for sure, but that's my intuition.
Yeah, I think that if that's how you feel, then that's how it is.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's the best I can do. I'm not trying to make a interesting story out of nothing. I think that's what really happened, you know, and it kind of makes sense. You know?
Wow, that's intense. Dude, the last question, and I can't thank you enough, man. Awesome. And I want to tell you, I know I mentioned the Robert Fripp thing. There's so much here that I could talk with Brian about. We'd be here for days, but maybe we'll have another call sometime on the Fripp thing, because that is interesting. But I purposely didn't open that up because that would have been a 30-minute answer. Not that I didn't want to hear you, but I'm trying to be respectful of time.
Yeah. Well, I could give you like a 3-sentence answer if you want. Like,
I don't believe for a second you can give me a 3-sentence answer for anything, but go right ahead.
All right. Well, Robert is a loving, funny, wonderful, highly intelligent, cranky, snarky British male. He is everything people think he is, and then he's everything people don't see. And the Guitarcraft experience I had, unique to me, was entirely positive. And I picked up so much wisdom from him and from his lineage of teachers, which go back to like Gurdjieff. And
go back to who?
A guy, Gurdjieff or Gurdjieff. He was like the first guy to combine Eastern and Western thinking. He educated very wealthy people on consciousness back in the 20s and 30s. I think it was the 30s. I don't know. I don't want to misspeak. And then he had students. He had J.G. Bennett, which was Robert's teacher. And so there's this lineage of stuff. And Fripp brought the guitar into it. So instead of people sitting around working on themselves, they actually had a mirror. They had the guitar as a mirror. Like, if your note is true, if it's in tone, if it's in tune, if it sings, then you're in tune. So the instrument became mirror for the consciousness of the person, which was done previously by people older than him without the guitar. So that's kind of what he brought to that tradition. And so my 3-sentence answer has gone into 7 sentences, but Guitarcraft for me was a wonderful time. And Robert is sort of, I think, happily, intentionally misunderstood. He's a wonderful guy and so much wisdom and what a unique and powerful artist, you know. Better today than ever, I think. If you go see King Crimson today, you'd be blown away. They're amazing.
Thanks, man. So it wasn't like est for guitar players.
No, people have the perception of it being all sorts of weird things. Yes, we did meditate in the mornings, but nothing's compulsory.
Yeah.
And meditation helps, you know.
Oh yeah. God, yeah.
Stilling the mind and body, you know, for 30 minutes a day. I don't do it anymore, but I did it for 7 years and, you know, 5-6 days a week. And
holy crap, that's a major commitment.
It helps.
Yeah.
No, it helps. Well, I mean, it probably wasn't every day for 7 days. It was most of the days.
A lot of still.
It was a lot of days.
Even if you did it 3 days a week, that's a lot of meditation, man.
Yeah. Yeah. But it wasn't like, you know, thinking about something weird. It was just, he used to call it the practice of doing nothing, which is basically just chill, chill. No concepts, no weird, you know, Eastern spiritual anything, you know.
Yeah, I'm not one of these guys that like ticks off boxes. I mean, I in my mind, if you do something over time repetitively, that's a commitment and you're doing well at it. You know, some people are, well, you didn't do it. Fuck that. You did it 3 times a week for 7 years. That's wonder. I mean, okay. Right. You know, were you getting graded on it? Was you getting paid, paid by the minute?
Totally. When even the intention to do it, when you don't do it, that creates a certain something. Yeah. So just to intend it and to fail is better than not.
Yeah. You know? And dude, last question, and thank you for talking about that. Biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of this has been deliberate and intentional? How much is just a part of aging?
Oh gosh. Well, I have sort of a healer warrior spirit, if you will. And I've just picked my battles more carefully, intentionally. I don't think it's aging. The aging affects me physically. Like, I've always had scoliosis, so, you know, I couldn't play football. I couldn't fly jets in the Air Force. You know, like, I couldn't be a race car driver. I don't have the body for it. but I've always had that. But what's happened lately is like, my eyes are going and all that stuff. So physically is where I see aging. I don't feel the aging in other ways. I feel pretty young in my mind and my spirit. But I've chosen to, I guess when you're younger and you're not successful, whatever that means, you're more inclined to be defensive and to fight for your position in life. I think that's true for everybody. You see something wrong and you want to speak up, or you think you deserve something and you want to go for it, or you think someone is doing something hurtful to someone else and you want to stand in the middle of it. I mean, this was my thing. Again, I'm a kind of a warrior healer, if you will. And I've just over time decided to sort of shift that into a facilitator of other people's elevation where I can. And so there is some sort of warrior there. I mean, I'm still, you'll find me on Facebook trashing the president on a regular basis.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I've put, I'm still, there's principles that I will argue for and fight for to this day. But when it comes to most of life, I'm really just looking to enjoy as much as I can, but still keep that sort of, warrior spirit, just putting it in a more productive way. I've come to accept that there are people I will resonate with that are going for high standards and trying to be their best and trying to make the best music they can and trying to, in whatever category they're going for it, right? So people who are going for it, I'm going to resonate with those people. And there's a lot of people who aren't going for it. And I've just come to accept those folks, as opposed to seeing it as some sort of tragic loss of potential, because my brain lives in potential, whether it be talking to a person about what they could be doing with themselves or listening to a record and hearing what the record might be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. It's very congruent with your business.
Yeah, I see potential always. So when you see potential, and maybe that's my superpower, it's also a weakness because potential doesn't happen, maybe ever. So you're always falling short. And you have to kind of come to terms with how to manage that. And I've just gotten better at managing that and deciding where to invest. Obviously I get paid to help people achieve their potential.
Right.
And so that takes a lot of pressure off. So at that point, maybe I just stay on Trump's ass and have a happy afternoon.
Charles Bukowski, have you ever read any of his stuff?
I have.
He said there's a really great documentary. It's called Born Into This, and it used to be on Netflix. I don't think it still is. And I think it was in there, or maybe it was one of his books. He said, everybody's got potential. He said something like a baby's got more potential than I do, a newborn baby, but are they going to do it?
Right.
Everybody's got that. Yeah. Are they going to do it? And that's the fucking big cliff over the mountain for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and everybody does it to a degree. I mean, I guess that's the thing is, it's not for me to judge. It's just when you look at a situation, there's always possibilities. There's in the moment potential and possibilities that we all have all the time. And that's the real Zen thing of being in the moment. It's that Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech where he was here and he chose this, and he was here and he chose that. And you have that one with recording. You're in this moment of recording, you can choose this, and you're in this moment, you can choose that, and you can be afraid, or you can over control it, or you can flow with it. So that the potential thing kind of plays out moment to moment for all of us in all of our choices that we go through all the time. And that's very interesting to me. But I've come to really just try to enjoy it and encourage it and facilitate it in others and in myself, I guess, too, as opposed to seeing the downside of it, which is what's being lost. And I guess when I was younger, I would see what wasn't happening
Because the healer part of you is trying to fix. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like trying to fix it. Like, well, there's the possibility. Why don't we do that? Well, we're not going to do that. So it's looking at the glass maybe half full, to use that way of thinking in terms of potential. And that was a conscious decision of just being tired of being
your stress level must be like exponentially lower.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, and who am I to say? Everybody's doing their best. I get that. I mean, even Charles Manson was doing his best. It wasn't very good.
Yeah.
I think Hitler was doing his best. It was really not good. It was horrible. But I look at people like they're doing the best they can do, and where I can encourage and help and support those who are going for higher standards and greater things, I do. And so that's much easier than looking at all that's being lost.
Yeah, man. So, dude, I can't thank you enough. Let me tell people where they could find you. First of all, it's Brian Lucey, Brian. Brian Lucey is Lucey, but check him out at magicgardenmastering.com. He's an incredible mastering engineer. He's done a shit ton of good stuff. He's got 7 Grammy-winning albums, 4 Billboard #1s. Also, if you are looking for a really good mastering engineer, he works, as he's mentioned here, with people all across the spectrum. If you're, your first single, your first record, he does work on a sliding scale, and he's just a good guy. He wants to help you out, and but he's not going to see the potential that you're losing. But you might see the potential you're losing if you don't work with Brian. That was a great pitch, wasn't it?
Yeah, you should get paid for that.
I know I should.
You should think about that as a career.
Did I miss anything, man? And if you want to hit him up at Brian at magicgardenmastering.com and talk to him about your project and where you're at in your career, what you're looking to do. Anything I missed that is related to you? Because I want people to check you out if they.
Oh no, that was more than generous, and a great definition of opportunity cost. I think that's what they teach in business school.
There you go, brother.
just find opportunity cost. No, that was great. I mean, I'm thrilled to have new clients. I'm fortunate to be working every day, but there's always time for more.
Yeah, and I'll just sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but the person. I was referred to Brian actually by one of his clients, Matt Slahetka, who I interviewed a while ago. And before I even knew, one of the first things Matt told me is that he had such a badass as the guy who mastered his record. Because the first thing I did, I listened to it. I'm like, holy shit, who did your mixing and engineering here and your mastering? And he went right away into Brian long before I knew who Brian was or that he was going to introduce me to Brian. So, and Matt's a guy, he just came out with his second album. It's a phenomenal record. Matt's record is called Heart of My Hometown. And if you want to listen to Matt's interview, he goes under his last name, which is Slahetka, SZLACHETKA. And you can go to everyonelovesguitar.com or iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and look that up, or it's episode number 262 for me. Anyway, so if you're thinking about having a relationship with somebody that's a mastering, why am I keep messing it up? I want to say a masterer, but that sounds like S&M ish, a mastering engineer. Before I butcher this whole thing up, which I set up really well.
You're doing good.
I'm going slowly downhill. Check out Brian Lucey. He's a great guy, extremely cool guy to deal with, really authentic, and I'm not blowing smoke up his ass. He's a guy I definitely hang out with, and you should too. Anyway, dude, thank you so much for everything. I can't thank you enough. You're a really freaking cool guy. I'm really glad we got to connect, and I'd love to continue this conversation in person one day.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All righty. Everybody, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks again to Brian Lucey for spending time with us. Go check out Brian online at magicgardenmastering.com. And make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list right now. And remember, most important, happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.